right, welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. Always a delight to have Bob Just with us. We call him the Justimator. Anyway, he's a political commentator. He writes for quite a few magazines. He leaps tall buildings, outruns locomotives. He's a public activist. And he's just a cool dude. BobJust.com is the website, BobJust.com. You can go there and get most of his articles and see what he has to say. Good to see you, bro. How are you, man?
Thank you, sir. Good to see you, Perry, as usual.
Hey, before we get off on all the things you sent me, you want to talk about.
I knew this was coming.
I want to just come to this Cuban thing just for a moment.
Oh, yeah.
As you know, out in front of the White House, a lot of people are protesting that we're doing nothing to help Cuba, and the Republicans joined it yesterday. And is the president missing one of the biggest opportunities of a lifetime to promote freedom and democracy by not standing with these protesters?
Yeah, and it relates exactly to the general subject of the socialist anthem, Imagine, at the Olympics opening. Look, the Democratic Party is essentially an atheist party. Now, I want to say that there are two kinds of atheists. We know from the Bible, the good thief and the bad thief. There are plenty of atheists who are pre-Christian, but there are some that are vitriolic, and many that are vitriolic, and in my opinion, they control my party. So the Democratic Party for years now, since the Reagan era for sure, has had a problem confronting communism, because even though they don't necessarily agree with all the economics of it, they agree with the essential worldview, that being there is no God, government is God, and it's the final arbiter of morality, et cetera, and somebody's got to do it if there's no God. And so communism has always seemed like going in the right direction if maybe they disagree with certain things about it. They've always been soft on Cuba. My party has always been soft on Cuba and on the Soviet Union when the Soviet Union existed, and now on China. Well, guess what the thread is? It's atheism.
Interesting, because we can't help but think that Cuba's never been more weak than it is right now, and the people have had enough. They're pushing back. The president hasn't even stepped to the White House and say, I support the protesters. His silence is deafening. And
it is.
And all you hear is crickets on the other side about this whole issue. And yet, is he forfeiting the Hispanic vote now?
You know, I have to tell you, well, certainly I think the Cuban vote, and Cubans are very influential. I have to tell you, there's something very interesting going on with this, but it also relates to what I think is going on with America and the coming election in 2022 and 2024. And it's called preference falsification. And preference falsification is, to give you a simple example, you're over to some friends for dinner, and they ask, how did you like the meal? And you didn't think it was really that great. Oh, it's great, okay? Because you don't want to really say the truth. You don't want to hurt their feelings, et cetera, et cetera. Preference falsification is when everyone, like critical race theory, a lot of people go along with critical race theory because they're afraid of it. And so the impression is created, Black Lives Matter, the whole last year, the impression is created that people support it when in their heart of hearts they don't. And that's preference falsification. You don't really know what they think. We may, in terms of Cuba, and in terms of what we might be able to see, we might see the sudden reversal in Cuba that, and I think we are seeing, I hope we are seeing, that we saw with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union looked like everything was going fine, but the Soviet people, the Russian people, and the other countries involved in that communist union really hated it. They hated the life they were living. They hated the atheism of it. And it's the same thing in Cuba. Well, guess what? This relates to America, because we have been under atheist domination in this country. And I mean cultural domination, which, of course, affects politics. It certainly has with my party. For 150 years, Perry, minimum. I've been, I was an English major. And a lot of the books I went to a Christian high school here in New York City. A lot of the books I read were atheist books. I was just reading, and I'll tell you this quickly. This is a serious thing. We've been living in a bubble, an atheist bubble. You know, the Bible says atheists are fools, meaning simply they don't understand life. They don't even think there's a difference between men and women. They don't know how to lead because they don't know where they're going. Okay, it's a very squishy kind of belief system. You know, whatever tickles the ear, as the Bible says. All right, so I was reading about Thomas Hardy, and again, I was an English major. Thomas Hardy was born in 1840, means he was 20 years old when Darwin's Origin of the Species came out. And in this book I'm reading, Thomas Hardy literally says, I could no longer believe this fairy tale faith, you know. Remember, this guy became a very influential novelist, very influential in the late 19th century and the 20th century. What I'm trying to say, and then, of course, the famous Abraham Lincoln Proclamation in 1863, we've forgotten God. So you go into the 20th century, you had atheist journalism. The atheist journalists raised up and praised atheist novelists. We have been living under this foolishness for all these years, and now I think the bubble may be about to break because my party has so adopted things like, you know, Marxist critical race theory and all these mechanisms that are trying to make sense out of life for people who don't believe in God. So they're trying to figure life out, and they can't come to any real conclusion because there is no there. Okay, there's no truth. So that's what we're dealing with, and I think it may be able to bust out in Cuba, and it might be about to bust out here in America.
You know, Bob, every once in a while, you are absolutely brilliant.
Every once in a while, I get lucky.
That was one of those moments. That is so clear. I mean, what you helped me to put back into perspective, it clearly is spiritual. All of this is spiritual.
Oh yes.
And we're dealing with atheists. I mean, this is what we're dealing with. And I also like the categories that you created: the pre-atheists and the atheists, I guess, which means that some are possibly redeemable.
Yeah, we call them pre-Christians. A lot of my friends call them pre-Christians. You know, you can tell they're decent and they're yearning to know, so they're seekers. But then there's another kind that you don't want them to be president. You don't want them in charge of your country.
Okay, so let's come back to this atheist movement, not only in our culture and our country, but literally around the world. It did manifest itself, and it continues to, in the Olympics. This poor Olympics has been plagued with every nonsensical thing you can possibly imagine.
Right.
From nuclear contaminated food to people standing down, people leaving. This is a mess. And it's in a country with less than 15% vaccination. And yet we let our athletes in, and we won't let ourselves into a restaurant if we've been vaccinated. We still have to wear a mask. I mean, the inconsistency of this stuff is just over the top.
But to see, that is the essence of it, Perry. Atheists are, by their nature, inconsistent because they don't have a there. They don't have a rock. We have a rock on which we stand, Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. We have the testimony of the Hebrew Testament and the New Testament of Jesus. We share that word. There's a wonderful documentary on Amazon Prime called The Fight of Our Lives. And basically, it's Jews and Christians coming together saying, we're fighting for Western culture. We're fighting for under God Western culture. And what we're up against is, imagine there's no heaven. You know, the Lenin, it's a tragedy that he was killed so young. I actually really think he was a seeker. And I think if he had lived, he would have rejected the lyrics of Imagine There's No Heaven. But you know it's interesting, Perry? This is not the first time they played it. They played the Imagine. This just goes to show you this is a globalist socialist anthem. They're serious about it. Of course, they don't believe in God. They played the Imagine in 1996 at the Olympic opening. They played it in 2006 at the Olympic opening. They played it in 2018 at the Olympic. I mean, now they played it again. They're serious about this. Imagine There's No Heaven. Bishop Robert Barron wrote a wonderful column in the New York Post about the absurdity of this anthem, right? And he makes several great points. I recommend it. that people look it up. But one of the great points he makes is the Lenin anthem calls for the brotherhood of man, right? Well, there's no brotherhood of man if we don't have a shared father. Now, he makes that point. I wish I could claim it, but it's beautiful and it's so true. What makes the brotherhood of man is the understanding of God, of a truth that we can serve and seek. And of course, Christians have it vividly and in its fullness in the man Jesus Christ and the man God Jesus Christ. Other faiths have parts of it. You know, there's truth in many religions, as C.S. Lewis points out. But the truth is our faith, and our faith calls atheists, or the quote is, for people who say there is no God, are fools. So they don't understand life. Everything to them is the emotion and the pressure of the moment. They live completely conformed by the world. So you see corporations go to critical race theory. You see people bending to pressure, social pressure. They don't have any inner core. You know, what used to be called in politics the adults in the room, the ones who could set aside pressure and ideology and say what's right. But my party doesn't have any people like that anymore, not really. You know, who'll sit down in a room and say, well, wait a minute, what's right? Well, why? Atheists don't believe in a what's right. They believe in where are we going now that we can maintain power because we want to do good, right? But they believe government is God. Okay, that's the basic principle. And we now live in a world of about 200 gods. So the one God they all seek is the global God, because then they have one lawgiver, one authority. And they think that will bring peace in the world, which is what Lenin's anthem is about. Imagine. They think it'll bring peace in the world, but it'll only bring hell down upon the world.
Well, I just don't want to interrupt you. You're on a roll here. You know what's interesting about this, Bob? I read an article the other day about what's happening with the Olympics, and it's really sad to see this happen. It's been politicized to the point and culturalized to the point where it's almost, in fact, the viewership is an all-time low. People just aren't interested in it.
Good.
But here's the thing. The question, given what you just said, will the Olympics ever come back to the United States? And one of the articles that I read, or the article that I was reading that made the comment, it's possible, based upon what you just said, that it'll never come back to the United States for one reason. And that is, too many of the Olympians may declare political asylum while they're here.
Oh, yeah, I know.
And that has happened. That has happened.
It has. In the Soviet Union, it happened. It'll happen in China, too. It's profound what you're pointing to. We are still the island of under God freedom in this world. Liberty under law is what Ronald Reagan called it. Mm-hmm. Why did the left hate Ronald Reagan so much? He was a Christian, a believing Christian. Why did they hate George W. Bush so much? He was a believing Christian. Why did they hate Donald Trump so much? Who, focus on Dr. Dobson called a baby Christian, which is probably accurate. But Trump declared God. He declared we're a nation under one God. Well, that is terrifying to the left. The left, they have trouble admitting it, but they are hostile. Look, the Bible says the world is in enmity with Jesus Christ. Right. This is a fact. This is a biblical truth. You can count on it, okay? So when there's a global movement, which the Olympics is, it's going to be in enmity with Jesus Christ. If there's a party that doesn't declare, or a candidate that doesn't declare Christ, which is the kind of candidate we need to vote for, they're going to be unreliable. We've reached a point where we have to really face up to the meaning of when the Bible calls atheists fools. We have to really absorb that. We used to think, well, not if they have a PhD from Harvard. But excuse me, if they have a PhD from Harvard, it just makes them more effective at being stupid. as an atheist. Being clueless is a good word to use, because they're not really stupid, but they're clueless. They don't understand life. But meanwhile, they talk so smoothly.
Yeah. Let me take a break here, folks. I just don't want to interrupt what he's saying. Give us, his website is bobjust.com, and a lot of these things that he writes about are on his website, and you can also check out his articles there and some of his videos, and you'll see him in various magazines as well. Let me take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about, imagine if there is no gender difference. Okay, welcome back. Always a delight to have with us Bob Just. He's a political commentator. He writes for various magazines. You can see Whistleblower, WorldNet Daily. You'll see his articles. Go to bobjust.com, and you can keep up with a lot of things that he traffics and takes a long, hard look at. All right, Bob. With this cultural revolution that we're in, and the whole gender identity thing, which is such a mess. But is it possible, if they go to total gender neutrality, based upon the fact that I think there's 56 possibilities that you can be now these days, what does that do to the draft? Does that mean women can get drafted again if they institute the draft?
Oh, absolutely. That's where they're going. In fact, knowledgeable people have been predicting that since the 80s, when the feminist movement was really kicking in gear politically within the governmental structure. I tell you, Perry, we need to rebuke atheism, because all these things are the fruit of atheism. The recent Democrat senators, this is just in the news now, are calling for having women drafted. Our daughters, are going to be drafted. Now, plenty of people that are rejecting this, but we have to understand the left is very serious about its worldview. Remember, they think they're saving the world from superstition. They think they're saving the world from superstitious, stupid people. I mean, that's what they think of us. That really is what they think of us, because they think we believe a fantasy, and that not only is it a silly way of thinking in their view, but they think we're dangerous. So we have to really grasp that. They're very serious about this fight. Now, one of their agendas is there's no difference between men and women, absolute equality, right? So they've been working to get women in combat for decades now. And they finally achieved it, I think, under Barack Obama. Every time they get a presidency, they march the ball forward. They are very serious about it. Gain 3 yards, gain 3 yards, gain 3 yards. So that once you get women in combat, and this has been predicted for a long time, once women are actually in combat, even if they're not, frontline fighters, but actually still in combat, all right, receiving combat pay. Well, when that happens, then there's no constitutional reason to keep women out of the draft. The previous Supreme Court decision that women couldn't be drafted was based on the fact that they're not in combat. So the left has now won that, because we forget they're serious about the fight. Every time you vote Democrat, and I'm a Democrat, I say this, and I've been saying it for decades. Every time you vote Democrat, you are voting to have your country undermined, and you are voting to have God rejected. That's what you're voting for. And I don't care if the media says, oh, devout Catholic this or devout Christian that. Forget it. That's not where the Democratic Party is coming from. So the gender issue, they're marching forward on this. They're going to test this in the Supreme Court. And thank goodness for Trump, and thank goodness for a conservative Supreme Court. But we have to remember they're also honest. So even though they're conservative, if there's a constitutional principle that has been knocked down, meaning we don't have women in combat. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, we do. We have women in combat now. That changes the Supreme Court decision. So I don't think we can count on a conservative Supreme Court to say no women drafted, because The left is clever. I mean, they are clever in their determination to undermine the country because they think it's going to bring about world peace if we can just have one government. And America's, under God, America stands in the way of a no-God socialist globalist government.
Well said. Let me ask you this. Something that's popped up in the news just in the last day or so, and that is that the Biden administration now wants to do away with the Hyde Amendment, even though President Biden in the past has been for it. Now they're against it, which is basically federal dollars going to killing babies.
Right.
But now you have a president that is actually adamant, in spite of his so-called religion and his faith. But we've never seen an actual defiant from the White House on this issue. And it's been there for 40 years. It's been through a lot of administration change, and there it sticks. But now you got a guy that was for it, now he's against it. What does that tell you?
Well, I think, again, it's biblical. I think we have to understand that, and Jesus makes this very clear when it comes to the Pharisees and Sadducees. Yes, they knew the Bible, the Jesus's Bible, the Torah, but they knew it cold. There was no love. We have to understand what a pseudo-intellectual is, and then will help us understand what a pseudo-Christian is. A pseudo-intellectual gains knowledge not for the sake of truth, but for the sake of power, influence. So they want, a friend of mine a long time ago said, certain pastors, he's an African American, he said, certain pastors in the black community want to be pastors not because they're called by God, but because they're called by their mama. In other words, they have a personal ambition to be a pastor, not a calling, an ambition. And so pseudo-intellectuals, they're not seeking truth. They're not seeking knowledge for the sake of higher truth. They're seeking knowledge to get a position at Harvard, to get a position in a think tank. They're seeking knowledge for power. Well, there are plenty of people who adopt Christianity because, for example, classically, candidates, political candidates, they'll go to church because they know if they don't, they'll lose a number of voters. So they're like, the Pharisees. They're sitting in church, they're pretending, but they don't believe. They don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ. They don't believe anything. They don't have genuine faith. And so consequently, all these positions, like obviously the Hyde Amendment, which is really a crucial one, the basic principle that there are so many millions of Americans who think that abortion is killing an unborn child. That is, it's murder. For millions of Americans believe that. You're not going to force them to use their tax money to then kill children, kill babies. So that was the principle. I'm not going to force you to do something that's against your conscience. Well, that's a principle that you only believe if you hold to principle. But people like Biden, they're not about principle. They're about power.
All right, Bob, we've hit on a lot of things here. We both agree that this is coming to some kind of a climax, some kind of a collision here. Does God under America win?
Well, as usual, you're asking profound questions.
I mean, I asked that wrong. Is America under God? Excuse me. Is America under God? Does it win?
Yeah, I understood what you meant. I just want to read right out of Malachi, because I believe there's no hope for America if men don't rise up and if their women don't honor them. And right now we have a culture that rejects men and doesn't honor them, including all the manly things like military and police. This police thing is anti-father movement. And listen to this. We all know the verse, but listen to it. There's a reason this is the last verse in the Hebrew Bible. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. And he will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the land with a decree of utter destruction. We are living that utter destruction because we have rejected our fathers. And that's a complex issue because it's happened over the degrees of a century. The hard feminist movement started 100 years ago in the 1920s, the really hard right after World War I, which is blamed on Christianity, was blamed on Christendom, was blamed on men. My mother did that. You know, she admitted to me she hated men, and she blamed wars on men. It was straightforward. She always thought that because she didn't have any clue of what, you know, of good and evil, and you know, she didn't have any understanding of that. I say truly, when last time I was on with you, Perry, I really said we need an Elijah church, meaning a church that intentionally raises up its men. And I don't mean raise up your men like you have a Bible study class and you make them your students, but I mean calling on men to lead the church and lead the community. That's what Concerned Fathers is about. Yes, we always sought to be under proper authority in the community. That's why law enforcement loves us. But we are a rising up of men. That's what Concerned Families is. It's a rising up of men, and then a rising up of women who respect and love their men, and then a rising up of children who respect and love mothers and fathers of the community. So there's family and community as our motto. There must be a rising up. There's no hope for this country without revival, and there's no hope for revival without God's church, and there's no hope for that without fathers, without men. If men are sitting aside watching football games and tuning out of what's happening in our society, and if the women allow this culture that's hostile to men, it's also hostile to women. But if women allow that, if they buy products that are advertised to them with ads that show men in a contemptible way, women should just be saying, we will not buy that product. You will not undermine the men of our country. You will not undermine my husband. You will not undermine the father of my children. You will not. Boy, I'll tell you, women are a force. And if they stand up alongside their men and call the children to their side, you will have a chance for something wonderful in this country. You know, I just don't believe, you know, God called us to stand in the Jordan. Then he moved. We have to, look, church, we gather at church. It's very structured, okay? People do their jobs at church. Church is a system for worship, in effect. But you can't have a system for worship because God has to show up for there to be worship. But you still must have a system. We have to have a system for revival, meaning we have to stand in the Jordan. We have to organize. We have to be the visible church. Our community has to see us and see us having it in a loving father and a loving mother way. They have to see us be visible, just the way we are with Concerned Families in Grants Pass, which I hope, you know, we will one day be fully realized in what it can be. And it can't be fully realized without God's church. God's church is the key.
Well, you're the preacher of the day. I'm just going to go, amen, brother.
I know. God bless you, Perry. I always appreciate your support for Concerned Families and birthday and all of those things that we do.
Yeah. Go to bobjust.com. You'll be able to keep track of his writings and his articles. You'll look for him in Whistleblower Magazine. WorldNet Daily publishes a lot of his writings as well. Thank you, Bob. Keep up the fight, brother. Your perspective is spot on. God bless you, pal. Good to see you.
Take care.